Hi everybody, good day, evening, day, morning, whatever time you are watching our program. I can say it only in Russian, всё о яичнице. It's something about fried eggs, but you cannot translate it correctly to English because meaning will be lost. But in this program, we're talking with different people about different things. We can mix them and match them up. Like in fried eggs, you can put anything there and it will be tasty if you like it. Or no. I would like to introduce to you our guests today. It's Ellen and Leonard Lehrman, musicians, composers, poets. We're writing some poems. And for the beginning, I would like to Ellen to sing for us a musical piece, a song. Ellen, please, microphone is yours.
Thank you very much. I sing under the name Helene Williams, which was my father's name after he changed it from Solomovitz. Благословляю всё, что было, я лучше доли не искал. О, сердце, сколько ты любила, о, разум, сколько ты была, пускай счастье и муки свой горький положили снег. Но в страстной буре, в долгой скуке я не утратил прежний свет.
So that was Aleksandr Blok Joel and I set that to music in 1977 in memory of Efim Fogel, and actually in memory of Paul Gottschalk. And Efim Fogel was the one that read that poem at his funeral, and I found it very moving. And Helene sang that many times. She sang it when we did this recording. Благословляю всё, что было is the Russian title of it, and it's in English we say harmonize your spirit with my calm. It's a collection of songs in Russian and in English and orchestral pieces that we recorded with Vladimir Lande and the St. Petersburg State Symphony Orchestra in 2016. It was a wonderful experience in St. Petersburg. It was the first time I'd been there since 1971 when I was there, when it was Leningrad, and I met Sergei Slonimsky in 1971, and then again in 2016, and I just learned last week that he died February 9th. So we're going to do some pieces in his memory. But first, we want to do a piece in memory of my librettist, my collaborator, who died of the virus on April 3rd. His name is Joel Shatzky. This is a picture of him taking a bow with us at the end of our run of performances in 2014 of a piece called Superspion, which was about, it was a satire on espionage and spies, and we actually wrote it back in 1988, but then updated it after the Snowden revelations. And Joel collaborated with me in a number of pieces, including one that Helene is going to sing for you now. He wrote it, he actually won a poetry contest to write a poem about Ilya Krichevsky, who was killed during the coup against Gorbachëv. He was the Jew among 3 Russians who was killed. And I didn't know him, but Vladimir, I understand you knew his cousin. Is that right?
Yes, I knew his cousin, also Krichevsky, but I think his name was Michael. I don't remember exactly. We've met several times at young Jewish activists summits in the former Soviet Union, and he told me a little bit about his brother, how he was very active. He was really going for democracy in former Soviet Union and Russia, and it was tragic for them to find out on the TV what his cousin stepped forward in front of the tank, and the tank drove over him. It was very a tragic story, but also was very heroic story of a person who didn't afraid and stepped for democracy, for his beliefs, in front of possibility of a new oppression and new way of being back to Soviet Union. That was the story of the meeting with his brother. We've met several times, but that's all.
The incident that is described in the poem and in the song, which is called Kalinin Bridge, took place near Kalinin Bridge. Where is Kalinin Bridge?
It's it's a Moscow. It's center of Moscow. It's close to what we call White House, the building of Russian Parliament.
Right.
And that's all happened there. It's all was live on TV.
Right.
When all what happened, and you know what, all of us was at that time like dropped everything what we were doing, and we were watching TV with slow breath, like holding our breath and watching what's going on there in Russia.
And Ilya Krichevsky is one of the few people that we can still say was a hero, a Jewish hero in Russia.
Yeah, well, he was one of the modern Jewish heroes in Russia.
Exactly. And
who fought for democracy.
And this song is about, and we want to remember him, and we want to remember Joel Shatzky as we sing this for the first time in 28 years. Okay.
Okay, Leonard, if you can just sing the song about dedicated to Ilya Krichevsky, it will be nice right now because we are talking about him, talking. So let's sing something about him.
Helene will sing that.
As soon as she fixes the camera. She fell down. Low tech, high tech. No, don't start till I'm there. No. You know, it's hard to be technician and performer. That's what it is.
Ready? Yes.
The metal column pauses at the river, surrounding it defiant, angry crowds. Then from their midst, one man strides out before them, and voices pent up anger, clear and loud. The darkness of Kalinin Bridge behind front the waiting guns, arrogant as death. Alone he strides before the tanks, defiant he shouts, then pauses, gathers hurried breath. A crack of light, a shot breaks through his shouting, and Ilya falls, an item in the news. Kalinin Bridge became the scene of conflict. 3 died last night, 2 Russians and a Jew. And dying to his vision and his power, the joyful plans for homes of light and glass, new cities filled with gleaming domes and stars. And now this architect fills space beneath the grass. That world he died for, broken in an instant. That harmony, now fractured voices in the air. Will we know again the courage of that moment, when Ilya's dare had spoken for a million days? What vision did he hold to make his stand? This architect of hope, born from despair. May Ilya's voice live on where freedom lives. His dare will speak out for a million days. His memory will speak out for a million days.
Great, thank you, thank you. It was really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Performance.
I want to say that this is the first time we've performed this in 28 years. We did it on a concert of political songs in Manhattan, sponsored by a wonderful group called Composers Concordance, which was founded by our friend Joseph Pehrson. And he too died of the COVID virus at the beginning of April 1st. So we're memorializing him too in this. This is definitely a memorial program.
Leonard, can I ask you a little bit? Can you tell a little bit about yourself, your Helen? You are descendant of Jews who immigrated from Russia.
Yes.
Because you still know Russian a little bit. Helen, does Helen know Russian or not at all?
Before we went to Russia, in
In 2016.
2016, right? I went to community college and sat in on a Russian class and did all of the homework. And I was very good at finding out about people and their backgrounds and discussing the curriculum of universities, because that's the way the course was structured. But I couldn't ask for a cup of coffee. I just would go, cafe, hamburger. You know, I would use the intonation, but I had no vocabulary, and my grammar was up to maybe the accusative. It was, but I pronounce it pretty well.
Yeah. Well, Helene sings in 17 languages, and she's learning Romanian. Actually, her father was from Romania, and we were there in October. And I wrote a whole cycle of poems, of songs in Romania, which she has sung in English and is learning in Romanian. But Russian is something that I learned as a child. My mother grew up in. She was born in Samara, and Krylov, it was called then. And she lived most of her youth in Leningrad. She loved Leningrad. Later, we're going to do a song about Leningrad, which she loved. She came to America in 1935 at the age of 12, knowing no English, and she learned English better than any English speakers. She was the best editor and corrector of English that any one of us ever knew. She was amazing. And she worked as the secretary to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow Dana, who was the leading expert on Soviet and Russian drama. She also worked as the secretary to Ernest J. Simmons, who was a great teacher and writer on Russian literature. And she took his course, and afterwards he told Professor Thomas Bird, who is at Queens College, he said, Emily Lehrman could have taught my course.
You have to mention the poet.
And of course, you know us because when we were in Russia, we gave, in Belarus, we gave concerts in Minsk and Vitebsk and Babruysk and then in Moscow. And I mentioned that my mother had been the periodista for Solomon Mikhoels in Boston. And you found out about that and you called us. And we came up to Boston for that wonderful program that you put together about Mikhoels, with a section about my mother as well. And so this is how we know each other, and it's through my mother and her love for Russian literature and for Russian culture, and also her having been the interpreter for Solomon Mikhoels.
I want to talk a little bit more about that piece of or really history. It's not just story; it's a history. But before I will talk about that, I would like to ask you to introduce a little bit more yourself to our audience, maybe in Boston, maybe somewhere else. A little bit how you became musician, how all the stuff, writing, making music, how it came alive, how it entered to your life.
Well, I was responding to music even before I could talk.
You were born in New York, correct?
No, actually, I was born in Kansas, but that's only because my father was in the Army, and I only lived there for a year, and then I came to New York, and I am a New Yorker. I was first in Queens until kindergarten, and then I came to Roslyn, which is Long Island, a suburb of New York City. And I lived most of my life in Long Island. But then I went to Harvard, so I got to know Boston very well. My father was also a member of the class of '42. He just passed away on January 19th, and we're doing concerts in his memory too, of course. He met my mother at Harvard. Actually, in Boston, my mother was the head of Russian War Relief in the junior division of Russian War Relief while she was a student at Simmons, and he fell in love with my mother. She was the girl from Leningrad, and they decided to marry and to raise a family and to try to make the world better. You know, Tikkun Olam, and I was their first child. There are two more children. My brother and sister are both in Boston. My brother is at the Tufts University. He's on the faculty there and in music. and my sister runs an arts camp in Framingham, Massachusetts. So we have a lot of ties to Boston, and we come up there every so often. I will certainly be there for my Harvard reunion next year, my 50th reunion. So I studied music with Elie Siegmeister privately. I was his youngest student, and he was a very good friend of Nikolai Slonimsky, and then also of Sergei Slonimsky. That's how I got to know Sergei Mikhailovich. Elie Siegmeister was a very strong influence on me, as was Leonard Bernstein. And the two of them were very influential on me in working on the music of Mark Blitzstein, whom I didn't know, but they both knew him very well and encouraged me. I ended up completing or adapting 20 of his works, including his magnum opus, Sacco and Vanzetti, which of course takes place in Massachusetts. And we have been trying to get that opera done in Massachusetts for decades. It was done in Connecticut in 2001, and it's scheduled to be done here in Manhattan and in Hofstra in September and October. We hope it's going to happen. Every day we hear new news, and we just don't know going to happen. But anyway, let's say my mother taught me Russian, and I really kind of found my voice when I was at Harvard and then later at Cornell, translating Russian poetry, setting it to music. And I'd like to do a song for you, which I sang for Sergei Slonimsky when we were in St. Petersburg on the 4th of July, 2016. And this is a piece that we recorded on this album with a small group of instruments. I'm just going to do it for you with piano. But it's a very well-known Russian fable by Krylov. Those who don't know Russian culture, I always say Ivan Krylov is the Russian Aesop or La Fontaine, because he writes about animals, but they're not really animals, they're really people and politicians and people that we know and maybe wish we didn't know. So this particular piece is called Quartet. It's a quartet. It's about a group of animals that decide that they have instruments and therefore they can make music, and they learn a lesson from the nightingale at the end. So shall I do this for you now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Проказница, мартишка, осел, козел, да косолапый мишка, затеялись играть квартет. Достали нот, баса, алта, две скрипки и сели на лужок подливки, клянят своим искусством светом. Ударили свечки, дерут, а толку нет. Стой, братцы, стой, кричит мартишка, погодите, как музыка идти, ведь вы так сидите. Ты с басом, Мишенька, садись против алта. Я, прима, сяду против второй. Когда пойдет уж музыка не та, у нас здесь горы. Расселись, начали квартет, он все-таки найдет навет. Постой же, я сыскал секрет, кричит осел. Мы, верно, уж поладим, коль рядом сядем. Послушали осла, усели напряг, а все-таки квартет не идет на лад. Вот пуще, прежнего пошли, у них разборы, споры, кому и как сидеть. Случилось, соловьей, на шум их прилететь. Тут спрос и все к нему, чтоб их вещиц сомнения. Пожалуй, говорят, возьми на часу теперь пение, чтобы квартет есть. И ноты есть у нас, и инструменты есть. Скажи лишь, как нам сесть, чтоб музыкантом быть, как надобно умение. И уши ваших не понежней, им отвечает соловей. А вы, друзья, как не садитесь, все в музыканты не годитесь.
Very funny. Yeah, it's one of the most famous Krylov basny.
It's on here too. I tell you, it was interesting that the singer who performs this on this recording came in from Siberia, and he had learned 2 other songs, and this one he was supposed to learn, and they didn't tell him he was supposed to learn it. So my God, what is he going to do? Well, Vladimir Landy said to me, fortunately, every Russian knows this poem by heart already, so all he has to do is music.
Yeah, because that's a school program, and we were told by our teachers to memorize this. But that's why every person in Soviet, at least in Soviet Union, knows this this text very well and can sing it at the same time. Like, not singing maybe, but at least declaim it.
I've seen cartoons about it in many translations, but has anybody ever acted it out, as far as you know? It would be interesting to stage it, don't you think?
Did you guys do that in school? Did you ever?
Yeah, in school, you know, I don't remember anybody who tried to stage it in school. Maybe yes, I don't know. Maybe something, because it's involved many instruments, and it's very easy to stage, but lots of prompts, let's say.
Lots of prompts, yeah.
Yeah.
So actually,
mention the record and the number and the company and how these people can find it.
You're right.
Hey,
You're right. No, this record is put out by Ravello. It was produced it was produced by Parma. And we should give you I can't read it.
I'll try to read it. Hold on.
I'm due for a cataract operation, which has been postponed because of the virus. So my vision is not.
I don't know what part of this to read, but the album is called "Harmonize Your Spirit with My Calm."
Right.
And
it's Ravello, and there's a number on here.
Oh, on that.
Can you read that number?
Sure.
Okay.
7951.
Is that right?
We have different numbers.
Yeah, our 79.
We can at the end of the program we can will edit what people will see how to find this CD, and maybe we can find it on somewhere on internet to buy or to listen, something like that.
I also want to say that what Leonard learned from his parents was a love of the arts, tremendous love of music, and also a very, very strong need to express the ideas of social justice. And that's where his music is mostly focused. But he does do very funny songs and some very beautiful love songs as well.
And the most recent song that I wrote is one that we want to sing. We have Helene sing for you now. This has actually happened because of Facebook, believe it or not. Facebook.
What Facebook has to do with that?
I'll tell you what Facebook has to do with it. This poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who was 101 years old and still alive, living in California. He wrote this poem in 2007 about the Bush administration and how horrible it was. And of course now it's even worse, but this poem was called Pity the Nation. And it was posted on Facebook. and I reposted it on my page. And a lot of people wrote, "Thank you for posting this. This is a wonderful poem. It's so important right now." Many of the people who wrote and said that were singers. And I said to them, "If I set this to music, will you sing it?" And they all said yes. And one by one, they have been making recordings that you can see on Facebook of this piece. Helene made the first recording, and she's going to sing it for you. It's called "Pity the Nation." Okay?
Cool. Let's do it. Let's listen.
Let's find it. Let's find myself in here too. Oh, cool. First try.
And I just want to say one thing
Come back.
that's kind of incidental and interesting that I didn't even notice until recently. This piece begins and ends exactly the way the last piece ended. You'll hear it.
Mm.
Pity the nation whose people are sheep and whose shepherds mislead them. Pity the nation whose leaders are liars, whose sages are silenced, and whose bigots haunt the airwaves. Pity the nation that raises not its voice except to praise conquerors and acclaim the bully as hero, and aims to rule the world with force and by torture. Pity the nation that knows no other language but its own, and no other culture but its own. Pity the nation whose breath is money and sleeps the sleep of the too well fed. Pity the nation, oh pity the people who allow their rights to erode and their freedoms to be washed away. My country, tears of thee, sweet land of
Great. That was very interesting piece. You are really criticizing the government.
Oh yeah. Well, this was 2007. This was written, but it's even more appropriate now, of course. Yeah.
You know how we say in Russia? Yes, we can criticize government in the United States.
Yeah, I know. It's true.
Like also,
we have to be grateful that we still have the freedoms, and I just hope that we'll have them, have more of them, and continue to have them after November. That's what we're really worried about right now.
Hopefully, especially with all this sitting at home, coronavirus, quarantine.
Very hard.
Very hard for people, I know.
Well, I want to talk about Sergei Slonimsky now, because when we were in St. Petersburg to make that recording, he told us that his opera, Korolir, was about to be premiered. He wrote it back in 2001, and in October of 2016, it had its premiere at the Ermitage, no, what was it called? The Conservatory did it, and it was the Ermitage Theater. and they invited us back to come. This is the first time we've ever taken a trip to Europe and gone back the same year. But we did. We were in June, July, and then we went again in October, November. And we saw this beautiful Korolier, and he signed the score to me. I want to show you what I don't know if you can see this. Can you read it?
Yes. Льоне Лерману талантливому. Да, талантливому композитору, something like that. Leonard, like very talented composer, something like that.
Yeah, it was very sweet of him to do this.
Yeah.
And he Druzhevsky, Sergei Slonimsky, and it was the 4th of July, 2016. And I remember he invited us to the conservatory where he was giving exams, and he said to his students, "Today is Independence Day in America. What American composers do you know?" It was delightful. He was such a sweet man. And Helene has well, I wanted to tell you that I fell in love with that Korolier. And of course, you know that Korolier was one of the great roles of Solomon Mikhoels too. And in Yiddish, but this is in Russian. This is in the Boris Pasternak translation. And I took the score, and as a labor of love, I spent a few weeks, and I wrote an English translation of the libretto. That is, I translated Pasternak's Shakespeare back into English, which was very challenging because, sometimes he left out a lot of things and sometimes he added things, so I had to fill in the spaces. But it was a really wonderful experience, and I've sent that to the Slonimsky family and people, and I hope that someday it will be done in English. Maybe they'll just do it with titles, but it's a beautiful opera. I wish we could do an excerpt from it. Helene has actually sung an aria from it, Cordelia's aria, but and it's on YouTube. But it's a little bit much for her to do in this program. So instead, I'm going to play the very first of his preludes and fugues. I have this. Where is it now? Here it is. Yeah, this is a volume that I bought in Moscow, or in Petersburg actually. And it's 24 beautiful preludes and fugues, and I'm going to play the very first one of his in his memory. Okay?
Okay, please do. Great. And Leonard, I would like right now to ask you go back a little bit and King of Lear, uh, Solomon Mikhoels, and your mother, and this piece of really Russian American history. All right, now the two worlds meet together. It's a very famous story when Solomon Mikhoels came to United States in 1943, as I remember, if it's correct, to collect, like fundraise money for Soviet Union
Yeah.
fighting Nazis at that time.
And
Can you tell us a little this story, maybe a short version of it, but at least how your mother was involved in all of this?
well, my mother was still a Soviet citizen. She became an American citizen on D-Day in 1944 and married my father 12 days later. But in 1943, she was still a Soviet citizen, and she was touring New England and speaking as the girl from Leningrad. There was a film that was called The Girl from Leningrad, and that's what they called her. And everybody knew her and loved her. And when Mikhoels came to Boston with Pfeffer, it was a natural to ask her to be their guide and interpreter, which she was. And
can you remind a name of your mother? You didn't pronounce it.
Emily Rosenstein, Emilia Rosenstein, or Emily Rosenstein, and then she became Lehrman in 1944. But in 1943, she was still Rosenstein, and she was living in Roxbury and studying at Simmons College. She graduated from Simmons in 45, and the last year she lived in the dormitory, but before that she was living with her mother in Roxbury. And she did a lot of exciting things in Russian war relief. She interpreted for many different people. Mikhoels was probably the most important, but there were other Soviet officials and generals that she interpreted for different places. There was a Youth for Victory rally on October 11th, 1942, where she was the interpreter, and there was an article in the Globe about her, or actually in the Jewish Advocate. They gave her the rose a year later when she interpreted for Mikhoels. But in October of 42, it was a very long program at the Bradford Hotel. It was called Youth for Victory, and they had pictures of all the people that were involved, including my mother, in the Globe. And the one person that was not in the picture, that we found out only through my mother, who had preserved it in an archival copy of a magazine that was called The Spirit of 42, Volume 1, Number 1. And apparently there was a song that was supposed to be done at that rally, and it was called The Victory Jive, and the composer was listed as Lenny Bernstein, and he was listed as an assistant to Sergei Slonimsky, because nobody ever heard of Lenny Bernstein. It was a year later that Leonard Bernstein conducted the Philharmonic, leaving an ill Bruno Walter, and became a household word. But until then, no one knew him. But my mother knew him, and he was in Boston to perform the Victory Jive, but he was writing pop songs in New York, and he didn't want his name on it. So that's probably why he didn't appear in the press or on the program. And we think he performed it, but we're not sure. We do know he was there, though, because his FBI file said that he was there. And when we performed this song that I discovered in the Library of Congress, and was able to tell them who wrote it, because they didn't know it was Bernstein and Sam Abelow, whose grandson is now a painter in Westport, Connecticut, and he gave us permission to use it. We performed it in many places, and I mentioned that we knew that Bernstein was in Boston because of his FBI file. And a young composer in Vermont said, "Why did Leonard Bernstein have an FBI file?" And I said, off the cuff, I said, well, because he believed in fighting for truth and justice, and some people didn't like that. And I sent that the story of that response to his daughter, Jamie Bernstein, and she wrote back immediately, loved the FBI explanation. So that's part of the story of Bernstein and Boston and Russian War Relief and my mother, which we're all very, very proud of.
Can you tell me a little bit, how close did you know Leonard Bernstein?
Good question.
Well, when I write my memoirs, there will be a whole chapter on that. But I met him at Harvard in 1969. I directed the first production of Mark Blitzstein's labor opera, his masterpiece, The Cradle Will Rock, in November. And it was only the second time it had been done in Boston. The first time Bernstein had done it at Harvard in 1939. So Bernstein found out about it, and I was told that when he heard that I had done The Cradle Will Rock at Harvard, he said, "I'm glad somebody at Harvard still has taste." And so when I met him, he knew who I was, which was very, very wonderful. He had dinner with a whole bunch of undergraduates at Dunster House at Harvard on December 2nd, 1969. And he was supposed to conduct, he did conduct the Beethoven Ninth with the Boston Symphony that weekend. And that night he was supposed to go to a choral rehearsal for the Boston Symphony. He never got to the choral rehearsal. He stayed with us until 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about music and theater and politics and Mark Blitzstein and how he had written a lot of music for a religious film that never happened with him. Actually, it happened with the score by Donovan instead of him. But he said, "I have a whole room full of religious music, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it. I'm going up to the MacDowell colony to figure it out." And that's when he figured out to write Mass. That was the piece that became Mass. Then a year later, he came back to Harvard for a production that I did of Trouble in Tahiti, his one-act opera that was dedicated to Blitzstein, and 2 other operas by Mark Blitzstein, The Harpies and I've Got the Tune. We did that at Lowell House at Harvard. Bernstein was there, and afterwards he yelled "Bravo," and I was crying for several minutes before I could speak to him. There were tears of joy, of course. But when I did speak to him, I talked to him about Blitzstein. In the meantime, I had gone to Philadelphia and looked at Blitzstein's scores that his family had preserved after his death in 1964. And Bernstein said he wanted to finish one of them, but after a year he gave up. And I looked at the score, and it seemed to me that the music was very much like what I had written myself. And I thought I could do it, and I asked him for permission, and he said, "You really want to finish Idiots first?" I said, "I'm going to try." And he took me in his arms and said, "God bless you." And that was another moment when I nearly...
It was very touching, very touching.
Moment. And then 3 years later, I in fact did finish it, and I played it for him. And
that's a story unto itself.
He signed a photo that my father had taken of us together in 1970. In 74, he signed it, "From Leonard to Leonard, von Herz to Herz." And he said to me, "I hope you recognize the quote from Beethoven's Ninth." And of course, Beethoven's Ninth was what he was supposed to be conducting the night that I first met him. So it had a connection there, as you see. Yeah, Bernstein was quite amazing. And he was very supportive of my efforts to get that work produced. It had 4 productions, it won awards, and it's on YouTube. You can find it, Idiots First. It's a story by Bernard Malamud that Mark Blitzstein began as an opera and then I finished, and with Leonard Bernstein's blessing. And as I say, I went on to complete or adapt 19 other works of his, including the opera Sacco and Vanzetti, which is based in part on the novel Boston by Upton Sinclair, and it's a very, very powerful story. We did it at the White Barn Theater in Westport, Connecticut in August 2001, and just a few weeks later came 9/11, the destruction of the World Trade Center, and all of a sudden it became impossible to get any opera company interested in doing an opera about anarchists as heroes and the law enforcement as villains. So we've been trying all these years, and then finally this past year, in part because of the immigration situation and the controversy and the bitter arguments about immigration policy and the abuse of immigrants by our government, people started saying, well, yes, the story of Sacco and Vanzetti is very important. They were immigrants who were persecuted because they were Italians, because they were anarchists, and we have to remember them. And the governor of Massachusetts in 1977, Michael Dukakis, he did not pardon them. He told me over the phone, he said, if I had pardoned them, that would have meant they were guilty. They were not guilty. They did not have a fair trial. They have to be presumed innocent. I exonerated them. And that's what we were hoping for with the Rosenbergs, actually. And in fact, I was very active in the National Committee to reopen the Rosenberg case for many years. I was told by Mark Litzstein's sister that when he was writing Sacco and Vanzetti, he was thinking of the Rosenbergs. But that's a whole other story. We're here because you invited us with the Dien Pobieda, and we want to remember the suffering of the Russians and the triumph over the Nazis. And we've selected a piece by a student of Sergei Slonimsky named Natalya Medvedovskaya. She set to music a poem by her father, Efim Medvedovskiy. They came to this country, I think, about 20 years ago. And I've actually translated quite a bit of his poetry. It's very beautiful. And this particular song, Zvučala muzika во мне, is about his living through the siege of Leningrad as a child and what it felt like when it was over. So that's what we want to remember on this day. And it was our dear friend Helene Williams who first sang this in the original Russian. And when I heard it, I said, I want to write a translation of this, and Helene will sing it. And that's what Helene is going to sing for you now. Okay?
Great. Let's do it.
Within me music would resound from childhood. I remember, but something foreign from without burst in, destroying slumber. The piercing sounds of breaking strings and of projectiles soaring, the drums of war so deafening, the bursts of cannons roaring. I heard the sirens' music blast, a sound that would not let go. The walls that screamed but did not last, a metronomic echo. And then I heard a violent sweet, intensely it was roaring. It was a bugle of retreat. A little child was blowing. I am not different Leonard. The peaceful tone, I hear it. And once again, it's Leningrad. Once again, it's Leningrad. It's youth,
Great, beautiful, beautiful, and thank you very much. It really was beautiful piece.
He went to
Uh,
get his.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I have to
Ah.
tell you, when I wore this hat in St. Petersburg, my friend Joel Mandelbaum said, "You made St. Petersburg back into Leningrad."
Guys, we almost have exceeded our time. Two questions what I would like to ask you. It's our traditional question already. First of all, what would you like to do when you have free time? Like whatever, especially right now you have lots of free time. And what is your advice what to do if you don't know what to do?
Well, I actually have lots of things that I've been waiting to do, and have the time to do now, which is very nice. So my friend David Amram is almost 90 years old, and he was about to celebrate his 90th birthday with all kinds of concerts, and they were all canceled. So he said, "Well, I'm going to consider this a commission from Cyrus the Virus, and I'm going to write pieces that I've been commissioned to write that I didn't have time to write before." And that's basically what I'm doing. Well, actually, right now I've been working on pieces for the York Theater. My new collaborator, whom I met through Jewish Currents magazine, Barbara Kahn, and I wrote a song which was #1 of the 30 songs written for the York Theater last week. And now we're working on a new song, which is about how anything can happen in the theater. And every 2 weeks they're having this, and we're hoping to have these songs. It's really a wonderful experience to do this. But I have listen, I've written 12 operas and 7 musicals, and most of them have not yet been mounted with orchestra because I haven't orchestrated them. They've been done. I have an opera based on Jubilei of Chekhov in Russian or in English. It's been done several times in English. It's never been done in Russian. I'm hoping they're going to do it in Petersburg one of these days. And I haven't written the orchestra yet. The orchestration is sketched, but it isn't written yet. So I have, I welcome having free time to orchestrate that opera and other operas of mine, and also to do some translations. Aleksandr Cherepnin wrote a completion of Mussorgsky's Zhenitba. Mussorgsky wrote a one-act on Gogol, and he only finished the first act. Several other composers wrote completions, but the best one I think is Aleksandr Cherepnin. And he personally asked me, because he found out that I had written with my mother, I had written a translation of the first act. And he asked me, would I do this, the second act that he wrote? My mother very carefully wrote out a literal translation. It's just waiting for me to make the singing translation. So these are things that when we have time, and now we do have time, we treasure the time to do the things that we want to do, and we're not happy that we can't do the things that that we are supposed to do with our jobs. My church has been closed, my library has been closed, but we have meetings and we do things as best we can, and we catch up on the other things that we are glad to have time to do. That's how we are doing it.
Oh, and I hope you also cooking. That's why our
cooking
traditional final question: how would you like your eggs? Any recipe for fried eggs or cooking eggs? Who does it best, Ellen or you?
He doesn't eat eggs.
I don't eat eggs.
So I had some leftover, I don't know, some spinach the other day, and yeah, eggs. That's right. You whip it up with eggs and throw a little soy sauce in, and you have Chinese egg fouillon. Little sesame oil on it makes it taste even better, or peanut oil, something. Yeah, sure. The first thing that happened with this pandemic was that I was trying to cook interesting meals every night, because it was something that was at home, and food keeps us happy.
But you know what my favorite food is, and I'll have it at any meal, anytime.
Kasha.
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 Absolutely.
Great.
I used to make it in the dormitory in college. We used to have kasha parties. Yeah.
I find Trader Joe's microwave meals really, really attractive, and that's a lot of what happens.
Ellen,
and then we eat out once a week. We order in from a diner. That's our eating out.
And when you cook, tell me, do you sing when you cook?
all the time. All the time. And and the funny thing is, when there's music on the radio, I sing an obligato to it. Leonard was kidding me.
Harmonizes.
I harmonize.
Okay. Guys, thank you very much. Our time is like...
Thank you. It's a real pleasure. I hope maybe we'll see you again when we're in Boston next year.
Yeah, I hope. Maybe we will also have possibility to hear one of the musicals of operas here in Boston.
That would be
also nice.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for having us. It was such a pleasure. Let us know when it's posted so we can tell everyone about it.
Yeah, I will. And please stay safe and fun and do more music.
Very much, you too. And enjoy your eggs.
Thank you.
You can take a trip on Her Majesty's ship. Peppermint patties.
And a town in Pennsylvania.
Schools you can find.
You can even go blind just researching all the Yorks there are. Can drive you insane. You got rivers